That's a great question. I think in a way we can keep things quite simple, but at the same time, I think you bring up a really important point that can sort of ambush us. The simple version of this practice is really that, that when we move our awareness, it's like it is like that image of, I think probably all of you are old enough to remember um, LP records. There's when you lift the arm, the needle, and you move it and you put it down, a different piece of music plays. So the groove is the tracks, and you could see where the tracks were, and you would move the record to the next track on the album. And you could have the thing spinning around and the needle hung up in the air. There'd be no music. And so the analogy is that when we move our awareness to, say, sound, it's a good example, and we are with the sound, then we're just with the hearing. There's just the sound coming in. We're like with the dog barking or something. And then when we come to the breathing, we're just with the breathing. So it's kind of raw experience. We're just plugged into these various things. And when we come back to ourself or our thoughts, whatever, that's also a raw experience. And I sort of like that analogy, but it's just an analogy, of course. You have to feel it. You have to feel what it's like to make those shifts. However, what we can do and where we get stuck is, I'm not going to continue with the record analogy. I'll tie myself in knots. Basically, what we can do is we can get stuck in the thinking mind, and we're essentially thinking about sound, thinking about our breath. And in some ways, observing is a kind of ghostly version of that. Because if we are observing sound, obviously, that's the wrong thing to do. We don't observe sound, we hear sound. We don't observe breath, we feel breath. So even in the word, there's a sort of disjunct. And it comes, of course, from the sovereignty of the eyes in our senses. We are primarily visual creatures, we're always looking at things. Or the vast majority of information that comes in about the world comes in through our eyes. And so that is the kind of metaphor that we have, that when we're inside our experience and we're moving awareness around, we reach for the metaphor of looking at things. But of course, here's the thing. Here's the object. And here are my eyes. I'm with my eyes looking at the object. I'm not with the object. But when let's see if I can do it. When you come into focus and you are just listening, or you're just with the breath, or indeed just with your feelings, then you are the object. There is no longer any separation. You're with the object. You are sound. You're plugged into sound. You're plugged into your breathing. You're plugged into your feelings. And we can just jettison that extra ghostly observer. We don't need it. It's a sort of hangover from Descartes. It's a hangover from the 17th century notion that there's a mind, and that's separate from the body and the material world. That somehow the mind is some googly fluid in the pineal gland that has a separate track or a separate existence from a sound or a smell or a taste or an orgasm or a feeling of sad. But modern neuroscience, and certainly Buddhism, collapses that. There is no little Jane sitting in the middle of the pineal gland um, watching experience. There is no little Alistair in the middle of his pineal gland watching sounds, or with little earphones and listening to sounds. There's just sound. There is sound and an organism and eardrums, and then there is this arising of awareness. And this is the mysterious thing, that is a co-arising. Buddhists love this. It's a co-arising. When we bring awareness to the sounds, then we suddenly have an experience. But the we, the I, is a co-arising phenomena. It doesn't come before the experience. It's not like there's this little I, like looking around and going, okay, sounds. Okay, now we're going to have the sound experience. Sound arises like if Ben barks. Suddenly, that's at the forefront of your experience. And there's the sound arising. And then there may also be alarm, or like, oh my God, my neighbors are going to complain, or whatever. There's also thoughts arising. It's not that it's necessarily pure and abstract and separated from everything else. It might spark all sorts of other things. But all those things arise and fall and disappear of their own, in their own way. There is no overarching you or anything that holds them all together. Only this habit of mind, this habit of inserting an observer into our experience. But this is why meditation and mindfulness and all these practices that look inside the workings of the mind, are so wonderful and so exciting. Because we go, oh God, all these years I've thought there's a little homunculus, there's a little me somewhere, maybe in between my eyeballs or in my heart center. But actually, it's much more radical and exciting than that. There is no I, there is no observer. There's just this amazing kaleidoscopic patchwork of events happening, and they sometimes coalesce with awareness as the glue into a sense of Jane or a sense of Alistair. But very often they don't. Often they sort of just all float away. For example, when we sleep, when we go into deep sleep, there is no more Jane, there is no more Alistair. There's just a body dreaming, sleeping. So it's a very good question, and it comes right to the nub of this adventure. It's really is. It's not. I'm not saying that this is one way or the other. The Buddhists have lots of thoughts about this. Neuroscientists have lots of also fascinating thoughts about it. Philosophers have lots of thoughts about it as well. But it becomes a kind of an adventure when we start to look at our own experience and go, yeah, it's strange. When I move my awareness from one thing to the other, there's this sort of, a little flicker of, oh, that thing that I was so obsessed with and absorbed into stops existing because now I'm listening to Ben barking, or now I'm with my breath. And that's very empowering. It takes away this sense of being stuck, of things just being permanent. It's much more like we're awareness bees flying around a field of phenomena, just dipping our proboscis into sounds, and then thoughts, and then emotions, and then sense of self, and then so we can everything frees up at this kind of quantum level, this sort of subatomic level. That's another metaphor, but you know what I mean.